It's the Friday Feels, and we're back with your first sip of the weekend. You're now tuned in to this week's episode of Your Happy Hour. I'm your host, Nicole Carmine, and it's amazing to have you here, joining me this week as we uncover the truths about being a human and a working professional. What are you up to this Friday? Well, whatever it is, this moment is just for you. Welcome back to another episode on the Feels podcast. We are now in the month of May, and that means a new theme that is called May I Motivate. And I think it's a really important topic to talk about motivation and how we end up giving ourselves permission to do things in the world, and what that means for us in terms of achievement. We've spoken a lot about this in different ways already this year. And just to take a moment to say, how is it possible that we're already in May? I cannot believe it. This year is just flying by.
It really is. And
today I have such a privilege to welcome someone to kickstart this journey of this theme with us. And it's taking me back to my days in New York, where this podcast actually started, the concept of it. And a big welcome to you, Justin Anderson, to the Feel Space and the Your Happy Hour podcast. It's really great to have you here. I met you at a rooftop party in New York one day, and here we are. So yes. It feels like a lifetime ago.
It's incredible. I mean, really, it's great to be here. It's great to be with you on the podcast today. I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks for sharing here. And I want to give a quick update of, I know you've had such an incredible life, and I think you can tell your story better than I can. But I mean, you've been an investor, you've been an advisor, you've worked with so many early stage companies, helping them grow. You're working at Solidia, if I'm saying it correctly, now for many years. And I know you've also kind of just worked across a diversity of companies and industries, which is super interesting. And also a lot of them being Fortune 500 clients, which I can imagine is really been quite exciting. So maybe just take us a little bit through how did you become who you are today and what you're doing, and what's the journey been?
That is a great way to start, I guess. So, I've had, as you mentioned, a varied career, but it's all really been centered around entrepreneurship ever since I could remember. I was very much an early entrepreneur, an annoying kid who was enterprising, looking to figure out a way to sell something or build something. But, I guess I'll pick up in high school where, I was, not to date myself too much, but this was kind of a wild west, or the long tail of proliferation of websites. And so I was doing a lot of web development way back in the day. So I built this a little bit of an empire, and went to a really great college. And while I was in college, it was really great school known for finance. So everyone around me was going to investment banking. I knew I was an entrepreneur at heart, but I'm like, you know what? Let me see what this fuss is about. So I had the privilege of spending a couple of summers working on Wall Street, which was great because sometimes the best career advice you can get in lieu of finding something that you really enjoy is finding something that you don't enjoy. And I would put that those summers of investment banking, not that the people I met were incredible. It's a really dynamic industry, and there's certainly people who I know are dynamic bankers, but it just wasn't really putting me in the position to leverage my skill set. And I just had this bug of entrepreneurship. I wanted to build something. So, here comes my senior year, and I'm thinking through, all right, I could go back to Wall Street, or do I want to do something else? And a consulting company, a boutique shop in New York called Aquis Consulting Group, was doing some on-campus recruiting, and there was an opportunity to be kind of on the ground floor of Solidia, where I'm at today. And so I thought about it for a minute, and I realized this was kind of a natural fit for me. It was an opportunity that was right at the intersection of finance and entrepreneurship. That's venture capital, and I think that for me, this was well before startup culture had become so mainstream. So this was something that I had studied in school, but was genuinely curious and passionate to really explore this industry. So that kind of fueled it. But I didn't really start on the investing side. To your points before about the various nature of my career, I did start on the consulting side, which gave me a lot of opportunity to do a lot of traveling, to work within a lot of large Fortune 500 companies, really understanding how strategic decisions are made from the top down in a lot of different industries. And during that time, it was a very dynamic time in the economy. So between 2008 and we'll call it 2010. And so, you get to see a lot. And at the same time, the startup ecosystem in New York was really starting to bloom. And we were able to take advantage and start to really build community and culture, which is something that's important, to me personally. And so, I've just been in a position where, for the last 18 years, I have fresh challenges in areas that I'm passionate about. And, as I look back and, was thinking at the time, these decisions weren't as obvious to me as they are right now. And, obviously I think it's an experience set that really helps me today in the work that, I spend my time with now.
It's amazing. I love how you just kind of followed the open doors. We were talking to a guest recently, and she was talking about follow the open cracks, and it's when you do that and what life presents you at the time, and if it aligns for you, then it's great that it's kind of led to this journey that you've been on. So what does the theme mean to you? May I motivate in your journey? What does motivation kind of look like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. To me, there's a few things that are important that motivate me. One, I have my own personal mantras, and one that I truly believe is how you do anything is how you do everything. And so, there are times where, I, much rather not take the late meeting or get up early to take the early flight to meet with the founder who this is the only time they can meet. But it doesn't align with my standard, my way of doing. If someone were to say, I worked with Justin, that should mean something. At least to me it does. And so I try to be motivated by delivering, as much of myself as I can in, the conversations and the work that I do, which is great. But, I also, it's not that I have anything to prove, but I'm in this pursuit of wisdom, if that makes sense. And it sounds kind of ethereal, but, it's really, for me, it's been this journey of understanding that, you learn more in failure. Sometimes, when you're on a hot streak, let's say, and everything seems to be working, that can also be just as scary as, when things aren't going well. And so you try to, over time, I frame that out of, just the scoreboard of winning and losing. And it's me more about, is the method right? Am I doing the right things? And that's what motivates me, is perfecting the method. And so, that's, it's a journey, obviously, as, AI and a lot of technology is keeping these challenges fresh, certainly, but, that's a big piece of what drives me. And then, one last thing I'll say, which is kind of an overarching bit of recent motivation, is my daughter that my wife and I welcomed into the world. I think, it's a whole different ball game when you start thinking more about legacy, and that's, I'm not old enough where that's at the forefront of my mind, but I'm literally looking into the eyes of my legacy, and that motivates you. And so, I'm learning a lot about how profound that motivation is, but it is a joy. It is definitely a joy, fatherhood.
I love that, and congratulations
Thank
on
you.
your new daughter. And I can only imagine what that must feel like. It's definitely it changes how you probably take each step in the world, and how you make your decisions. But I really like what you said about method, because that's a word that I don't often think about in this context. A lot of it feels very practical, and it's so, yeah, as much as it is ethereal, like you mentioned, and as much as a lot of what motivates us is divine kind of guidance in some way, and talks to the softer things. I think there's a very practical way about approaching life that aligns to you. So I really like that you mentioned that. And what's kind of like been your... Do you have things that you, like you said, your mantras, like your motivations that you talk to yourself to cultivate that method? Like, what does that look like when you build the method?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, again, I tend to lean more into the pragmatic or the practical. And for me, it's about solid habits. And I don't mean, certainly folks have routines and things, but I mean habits, how you train your thinking, how you examine problems, how you respond to adversity. Those type of habits, I think, is what really trains, outcomes to be more aligned with the effort. For me, it's, I try to consume a lot of knowledge. I try to, learn from, folks who have really done what I do well, and, really try to draw in from folks' experiences. But, there's a lot to be learned from listening and paying attention. And I think in a world where there's a lot of noise and you're constantly trying to, drink from a fire hose, if you will, it's like, how you can't just be a consumer. You have to start to think for yourself and define a unique perspective on how you live your life. And that's something that I think it's hard to do. It sounds so like normal and obvious, but it's hard to do when you're constantly fed noise. And so, training your habits, training your thinking, those are things that I think really help, at least for me, my focus and keeping, the tenacity.
I think there's so much noise these days. I mean, maybe I'm also dating myself, but I didn't grow up with social media either. And so it's like, you have to kind of adjust now to the way it's not like you're just buying the newspaper when you want to. It's there. You can open the app, I guess, or not. But I wanted to zone into what you were saying about listening. I'm sure you're such an amazing listener, because when you're working with startup and in venture capital and people who are building something, you really have to kind of hear what it is that they needing or wanting to do. And I guess going from idea to being in the world and building that successfully, like what does that look like? And what motivates those people that you've worked with in startup? Because I think everyone who's going to be listening is be like, please just tell us, how do we build venture capital for our businesses, So
that is, that's a fantastic question. I think, listening is truly a complex skill if done well. And when I'm listening to, let's say a pitch from a startup, or, listening to a founder kind of talk through a challenge, I'm not just listening to the words, I'm also paying attention to how they're communicating, and what they're telling me, what they're not telling me. Those things kind of help inform, my approach. And, I think the tough part, or the nuanced part, particularly in a lot of the work that I do, I used to describe it in kind of this way. It's getting people to do that thing that they don't want to do. And so to do that, it's not just hearing, what someone's issue is or challenge, or what they're trying to solve. It's also understanding what's important to them and communicating that goal back to them in a way that aligns, whatever my feedback's going to be. So it comes from this place of, I heard you. I know why you're saying what you're saying, or at least I think I do. And this is what's leading me to my thought. And I think a lot of times, particularly in, venture capital, there isn't the right type of feedback. A lot of investors don't really care to match the energy, for lack of a better word. It's more so, hey, it's not a fit, it is a fit or whatever. And so, actively listening, paying attention to those cues, I think helps me communicate more authentically, I should say, with our founders and generally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's also what I felt with you. I remember the first time and only time we met in person. I shared a lot of my entrepreneurial ideas with you at the time, and they were so fresh, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I just lost my job, so I was figuring out life. But I felt like you were really listening, to what I was saying. I really appreciated that. And it's those kind of moments that make you feel empowered as an entrepreneur too, to be able to go do the things that you want to do in the world. And but I love what you were saying about like the things that you don't say, because I think there's so much in entrepreneurship that you have to do but you don't want to, and it's so hard to get your mind around that and then get motivated to do those things. But if you get it right, if the right wording and structure and motivation, for lack of a better word, is there, you will do them with a joyful heart, because it's part of the journey. So I think that's such a critical job that you have in getting more and more startups out there. And what's been like the biggest challenge for you, and what you see in your work and getting through that?
This is something I've been talking about lately, even among my peers as investors. What's kind of tough, particularly in the venture capital business, it's one of the few businesses where failure is a part of the model, where, if I'm going to make 100 bets, 80 of those are going to fail. And I'm writing that check, smiling in the eyes of the founder, hoping they succeed, but knowing, the odds are against them. And there's that piece, but there's also then the work that I'm doing is failing, and connecting that some bit of acceptance of you are failing 80% of the time, but you should be winning at least 20 to, or we'll say 10 to 20% of the time as well. And so that for people maybe like me, who are kind of type A and very don't like to lose, competitive, things like that. That took some time for me. Every time I'm investing, I'm expecting great things from this portfolio. Obviously I know they can't all be winners in the home run sense, but I am expecting founders to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver on. And I think the tough part is sometimes you're doing everything right, you're working with the right folks, you've tested your thesis, and the market humbles you, and that feedback loop I think is really again, it's humbling. But what I guess what I've started to really enjoy about it is seeing the response, seeing founders, have that, this is one of the more, I'll pick my words here, traumatic experiences a founder can go through is pivoting, severely or shutting down a business. And I think it's even more, courageous for them to turn around, give me another call and say, hey, I need you to write another check in the next thing I'm doing. But I love it. To me, it's like you're either insane or brilliant or both. And, there's still a lot for us to learn. So that's been the hardest part, is just reconciling, failure as this concept of, not winning, but really it's just part of the journey.
I'm really needing to hear these words today, so thank you. It's definitely one of the hardest things I've tackled, and I think all entrepreneurs will feel this. And I think it's often the type A people who do go into being a leader and entrepreneur and all of that, and then it's like really hard to accept that, you know, you have to pivot, you have to make changes, but often those are for the better. And I love that you love what you do. Like I feel like it's such a blessing because, you know, a lot of people when faced with these kind of hardships in work will kind of walk away from that, but you're passionate about that, you know, and that's what drives you as well in your life. So I think the startups that you're working with are obviously very privileged to have you on their side, because I don't know if anyone will write a second check. So it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think, you know, building a business is hard. And I think a lot of founders, what's really tough, even going back to the noise conversation, is, you know, if you're a founder, you feel like you're constantly bombarded with, oh, so-and-so's round is closed, or this company got acquired, or all this seemingly success. But what I tell founders is you're seeing the headline. You're not seeing the years and years of the failures, the pivots, the, you know, tough conversations, the missed payrolls, you know, whatever it was that was part of that journey. Or in a lot of cases, you're not, you know, what you're missing is that the guy who runs that fund is this founder's uncle, or, you know, there's some other context that, you know, it's not, you don't fully get it. And so, you know, I tell my founders to run your race, you know, make sure that you are focused on what you can control. And, you know, the market will tell you. And, you know, if you perfect the method, then, you know, eventually the outcomes will show up.
That's so true. And, you know, comparison is, like you were saying, like it's the worst thing you can do really for yourself. And a lot of people are motivated by that, but I don't know if that's a lasting, sustainable motivation in any way, you know.
It's a slippery slope. And I think for a lot of founders who are driven by competition, I think that's healthy. But if you're driven by envy, that's dangerous. And so, you know, I think for some founders, you know, there's a really easy gut check in terms of what's motivating your decisions. That's an emotion that I think as a founder, you really can't afford to not have in check.
Yeah, that's true. It's like really going back to why you started, what you started, and loving that along the journey. So otherwise you will quit quite easily, I'm sure. Like you say, it will burn, the candle will burn out, and that's it.
Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. And that's okay. Yeah. You know, there's tons of opportunities out there.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to take a quick moment to talk about, you know, the things that motivate us and have gratitude for that. And we have a little section called the gems, which we do each week. And it's just a moment to say, like, you know, like you were saying now, the things that we feel alignment with, or maybe that's happened in your week that you're like, well, I learned something from it, or I want to celebrate this. And for me, it's been, it's been quite a week of unexpected changes and surprises in so many ways, of things just kind of like ending, you know, leaving my life, and for the best. I find that often universe does that. It's a bit like when I met you and I lost my job. You know, it's kind of the little things like that happening now, and it always aligns you back to the path you're meant to be on. And they're a little bit like mirrors to you in terms of where you're at. So that's kind of been a gem for me this week, is just accepting that again and seeing that, you know, these things are never negative. They're just gifts along the way. So, yeah. What about for you? What's happened in your week?
As I was thinking through kind of my week, a few things. I had some perspective of a very good friend of mine who's a wheelchair user, but recently, he's actually one of my very best friends. He had an accident recently, but, you know, we've been busy in, you know, life and all that, but we went out to catch a comedy show that featured disabled comedians. And, you know, the show was funny and it was great. It was good hanging out with him and catching up. But what really stood with me was that room was the most inclusive room I think I'd ever been in New York. And what I mean, there was a community of folks who all seemed to know each other, who all had a shared appreciation for the arts and comedy. I was completely taken aback by, like, I did not realize that, you've got these comedians who are, making light of all different aspects of living in New York and all this, but also like folks who are in various degrees of, disability or ability, all kind of enjoying this. I'm like, wow, this is like a rare experience that you don't really see. And, you get this feeling, I walk in rooms and I'm like, how does the business work here? How do these things work? And there's one room I was like, this is complete alignment. Like, this is complete, like, there is community, there's purpose, there's a mission, there's commerce, which is important, and it's a community that I don't think gets a lot of mainstream focus or attention, and so it all kind of took me back, and I felt it was one of those moments, and I'm sure you had many when you were living in New York, like, wow, this is such a dynamic city. It's only in New York that you get moments like this. So had a great time. And that kind of stuck with me, was that, wow, there's still real authentic community despite all the, social media noise and all that. So you need those reminders. Not enough people really interact in public with strangers. And I actually do think that is, something we all can do a little bit better, to help, engender more community. But I digress. That's what stuck with me for the last week.
No, you're not digressing. It's very on point, and it's very, very much up the feels alley, because exactly that is what we're building as authentic working community. Whatever working might mean to anyone, out there in the world. And I love that. I think that's amazing. And more of that in the world. I mean, there's a lot of art here in Paris, but I've never actually seen that either. You're right. New York is just full of surprises. So it's amazing that you had that. Thank you for sharing. And I also want to give a little shout out on that point to a people, place, and space that has the feels. And we always do this every week. And I'm going to do something a little different this week. And it's not a person, it's not a place or a space, but it's a being. And I want to give a little shout out to my dog, Gracie. And she does have an Instagram account, which is very inactive, but we can tag her. But she's just such a behind-the-scenes motivation for all of us. And she has taught me so much about, getting up every day and being motivated to be joyful and to live life fully. So. Feeling emotional just mentioning her, but I guess it's a bit of how you look at your daughter. She's a bit like that for me, but yeah, she needs a shout out. She has so many beautiful feels, and she has seen all the podcasts. Every time I have a podcast, I say I'm gonna do a recording, and then she goes into the room. She understands, So it's she's a big part of this community, and I hope to take her to more Fields events here in Paris and other places around the world as we travel. But a big shout out to her. And then I also want to do a quick shout out to our partners who help us along this journey and make this possible, and that is rss.com, who are distributors in the world, and they've also given our audience a beautiful discount. If you're interested in creating a podcast and sharing it, you can let us know, as well as Blender Bombs, which is relevant for you, Justin, as you're traveling and might need some nutritious snacks in the US. They're more US based, but they have amazing snacks, and they've also given our audience a 20% discount when you order with the Fields. And very lastly, BNE SIM, which is the best network ever SIM that I've been using since I started traveling, really, and it's been a life-changing travel SIM that's around the world. So reach out to us to learn more about the discounts for them. Thank you so much, guys, for making this journey possible. And then I have one last question for you, and that is, what is in your stack? So that's our reading list, and every week we ask someone for some book recommendations, and the stack is available on the website if you want to go check out the other guest recommendations. Maybe it's a book that you haven't read or that you've read and loved and you'd like to recommend. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, It's a great question. I usually actually read a lot of autobiographies or like, stories, biographies on people's lives, people that I admire or, have faced interesting challenges. But I'm not going to recommend any of those. I feel like that's, it's just my niche. But one book I actually just finished a couple of weeks ago that was really interesting for me. And I actually really relied on like comparison thinking and, really running your own race in terms of, spending money on things that make you happy. It's this book called The Art of Spending Money. And it's a really insightful book. I can get you the author, but he's done a few really great books as well. And so the book is really about, thinking about the psychology behind spending money. As a matter of fact, the author wrote The Psychology of Money. His name is escaping me right now, but I'll get it to you. But it's a really great book that really helps you think about why you make the decisions. And it's not about, what you're buying, but why, why you buy the things you buy. And so for me, it was kind of really interesting to read a book like that because it talks really more so about recognizing your motivations, your emotions, and what drives you to spend money. And I learned a lot even about myself in that book. I'd recommend it, definitely.
Amazing. I love it. I definitely want to read that one. I'm adding that to my now very growing stack as well. Thank you for recommending that. And for everyone listening out there, I wonder what you're feeling about motivation and what's that bringing up for you, where are you feeling motivated or not? What pivots do you need to make in your life? And it's okay if you have to be open to that. And just a huge thank you to you, Justin, for coming on and sharing so openly about your journey and about what motivates you and everything that you were able to share with an open heart today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been so lovely to catch up with you again.
This was great, Nicole. Thank you for having me.
If you haven't just yet, follow Friday Feels on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. You can share with us all your feels this week by tagging us at fridayfeels.co. And you can also find the website at that handle. And now, as you ease into this weekend, take a moment. Celebrate who you've become, what you've overcome, and what is yet to come as you do the crazy and cool things that you do as the authentic you. The truth about life and work is that it's hard, but the beauty is this global working experience that you're in, well, we earn it together. So keep connecting, empowering, and inspiring this week. And of course, keep it raw and real. Until next time.